Great. Welcome back to HPP, the podcast that covers college basketball, the NBA draft inside and out. I am Rich Harris, and thank you for joining us again. Today, I am joined by Caleb Slaton, the man who has no nickname and is heading to Italy for the holidays. What do you have family there, or is it just you got the time? And
it is my 6-year delayed college graduation present, kind of. It's a family trip. COVID kind of kept delaying it, and then we didn't get our passports back in time to go last year. And then with being a teacher, we got 2 weeks off, and it's not quite as expensive right now as it is over the summer. So we're gonna hit it up, and I'm counting down the hours until Friday gets here.
Okay, so you kind of look very Celtic. So why Italy?
I think, well, the trip started as just like a general Europe trip.
Right.
And then I'm a history teacher. I'm a history nerd. I just studied history in college. That was it. And Italy has a lot of history, a lot of well-known history. Obviously, every place has history, but a lot of well-known history. And I think just as we talk through the logistics of what we could feasibly do in 7 to 10 days, Italy seemed to have the best bang for our buck.
Right.
As far as kind of keeping the trip as simple and as relatively inexpensive as possible.
Right.
And so that's what we've settled on. So we'll do Rome for a few days, Florence for a few days, come back to Rome for a day or two, and then fly back after Christmas.
You're not going to Sicily?
No.
You'd like to live.
You just you gotta make sure you don't piss the right people off.
Right. If you ever watched the Italian show Gomorrah, Sicily does not look like a pleasant place.
I haven't. I've seen Sopranos. Love the Sopranos.
Well, Gomorrah takes place. It's about gangsters in Italy, but it's far more dark than The Sopranos. The Sopranos has some light moments, This has no light moments. It's just intense. But anyway, we'll jump right into the college notebook today, and we have huge news that came out this afternoon. College athletes who were denied the chance to play immediately after transferring a second time can now return to competition for now, after a federal judge issued a 14-day temporary restraining order against the NCAA. Some players were not quite sure if they're going to play. I know, for example, Andre Cabello could play tonight for Southern Mississippi against McNeese State, which is actually a pretty good game, especially if Cabello would play. But some players are concerned that if they do play during this window, and the NCAA does come out on top, then they could be in further trouble, than they already are. Right now they have to sit out a year, but it's definitely a positive news. It's kind of one of those things you ask Santa for. And I'll tell you the key players that have been affected, that are still haven't received waivers, and that's Brandon Murray of Ole Miss, Jalen Cook of LSU, Andre Cabello of Southern Miss, Adam Miller, Arizona State, Raekwon Battle, who we'll talk about a little more later down the road. But Cam Hayes of East Carolina, Davion Smith, Utah, Keelan Boone, UNLV, and even Marcus Adams Jr., I think, will be affected by this. He finally ended up at BYU after going to Kansas, then going to Gonzaga, and then landing with BYU without actually playing a game. He's a freshman. So what are your thoughts on this? To me, this is great news.
I know you're a big fan of it. I saw this on Twitter today and instantly thought Rich is going to love this. I mean, I think it's probably good for the kids. looking at this list, definitely some like impactful players. I don't know how many of them are going to be like season changing as far as the landscape of college basketball is concerned. I think more than anything, it almost just makes it. I do think it's good that the kids can play, but I do think there's a point where it almost makes it more confusing of like, what are we doing here? Instead of just like simplifying what's actually happened, the fact that like the judge is stepping in and being like, oh no, these kids can play. And then we have to like, it's only like a 14-day injunction too, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah. So what's going to happen at the end of the 14 days? Like, are they going to no longer be allowed to play? Yeah, I'm just curious to see how it plays out. I think we'll see like the big impact of this next year, and how it impacts the transfer portal going forwards. Good for the kids, but I think just kind of confusing as far as next steps overall.
Well, I think the whole argument is, it's a logical argument made by the kids is I should be able to go to school and play wherever the heck I want. Why do I have to sit out a year?
Sure.
And if you wanted to transfer, when you were in school, if you wanted to transfer to more than one school, there was nothing stopping you. So this is, to me, at this point in time, in this day and age, it seems like a silly rule. It's just, messing with people's lives. Because, some of these guys are pro prospects and they don't want to be sitting out another year.
Yeah.
I think the biggest names on this list, the biggest impacts as far as, the national championship goes, I think Brandon Murray, coming in Ole Miss for undefeated Ole Miss already would be huge.
Would be such a spark offensively for them.
Right. And LSU seems to have a decent team, and I think Jalen Cook would certainly take them up another level. We picked Southern Miss to win the Sun Belt conference, based on Curbelo would play. And so I think that would be a huge boost for them. Memphis just landed a player in the middle of the season. Who ever heard of such thing? Adding players in the middle of the season. Unheard of in college basketball.
I was not surprised that he's going to Memphis.
Yeah. And we're talking about Naquan Tomlin. Since we last were on the air, we thought actually the situation was going to be resolved soon. That was the information I was given. And turns out
it was resolved.
It was resolved. They kicked him off the team. Now, I heard a lot of stuff, read a lot of stuff about this. Apparently, one of the things he did in that barroom brawl was the main person he injured was a woman. So not good to be punching a woman. I don't know. I may be sexist here, but to me, that's worse than hitting a man. Always was in my book, but I don't know if that's sexist or not. But anyway, apparently there's more to it than that. At least that's what the college president said. He said Tomlin is off the program because there's more to it than just what went down at that bar where he was arrested. I don't know what that means. I have no idea. But then he promptly put his name in the portal, and like 2 days later or a day later, he was signed with Memphis. Now, here's the interesting thing is he still has to graduate from Kansas State until he can play for Memphis. And then he can go to Memphis as a grad transfer and play immediately. So as of now, he still has to finish out this semester, pass, graduate, and then he can go play for Memphis. So it could be a couple more weeks. But why did you say, I know why you said it, but I'm going to have you say it out loud. Why did you say it's no surprise he's going to Memphis?
I mean, I think we talked about this last episode when we were talking about Mikey Williams. Penny seems to not be afraid to bring in players with baggage. I don't think it's a bad thing at all. Like, sometimes those players and those individuals need a specific sort of relatability, a specific sort of relationship, a specific sort of structure that maybe the average college basketball program doesn't provide. And Hardaway seems to be the kind of guy that wants to provide that for them. I think if you look at their roster, they got a couple of guys that just like maybe
they have more than a couple if you include Mikey Williams. Quinterly's had his share of issues.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Are just some guys on the team that have like rubbed some people the wrong way at other stops. And like credit to Penny, like he's gotten them to buy in to play well together. People seem to be playing what their role is and not. I mean, there's it's not they're not fighting out there on the court, or we don't hear about these big locker room blowups happening in Memphis. So Penny seems to get people to buy in that way. But I just wasn't surprised because of that. Like I said, he seems like the kind of guy to kind of just bring these like wanderers in and kind of give them a home when they might not have a home other places.
The problem I see with that is if you get too many bad apples all together, it can turn into a really bad environment that we saw happen in New Mexico State, that we saw happen at Alabama. Some players can drag players that, maybe wouldn't normally get in trouble and kind of drag them into trouble. We've all been young and we've all seen this happen. Maybe us or people we know, they get in with the wrong people and they end up doing things that you wouldn't expect them to do. So, yeah. And there's more news from Memphis. Memphis is just a wealth of news this week. Center Jordan Brown, former McDonald's All-American. I think this is his fourth school.
He was a McDonald's All-American?
He was a McDonald's All-American. And started off at Nevada, then went to Arizona, then went to Louisiana, I think, and now with Memphis. His playing time from the beginning of the season recently started to drop. Then all of a sudden, he wasn't with the team. The school's official statement is that he's ill. He has an illness, and that's why he's not with the team. Other people are saying, through the rumor mill, that he's not happy and he's leaving the team. But as a grad transfer, I don't know if he has. I think that would be it. I don't think he could do anything at this point. I don't think he could, maybe he could sit out the rest of the season and play somewhere else next year. I don't know. I don't know what the rules are on that. But he might not be able to because he's already played a chunk this year. So don't know what's going on with Jordan Brown, but don't expect him to be seeing him, especially now you got Tomlin who can play the 5.
I like Tomlin a lot.
Oh, yeah. Tomlin's definitely a better pro prospect.
Yeah, he'll start right away for them.
Yeah, definitely.
Him and David Jones is a really great forward combination at the college level.
Exactly. So Brown, is probably not going to have a lot of playing time. So who knows? My guess is he'll probably leave the team and probably turn pro and then be in this year's draft. And when I mean turn pro, I mean go to G League or Europe. All right. So next on our news is Texas Tech's Devin Cambridge suffered a season-ending injury, knee injury. So that was a pretty big blow for Texas Tech. I think he was their third leading scorer. He's a nice all-around wing, pretty athletic, good, solid defender. Yeah,
I think that's more than anything that's going to really hurt their depth. I've liked what Texas Tech has done so far. I really like the way their defense is playing. Their offense needs to come around a little bit, but I think they're going to be a really tough team in the Big 12, and this will definitely hurt their depth playing against some of the wings.
Yeah. Other injury news is Colorado star freshman Cody Williams will miss about a month with a wrist injury. I'm seeing now that he's on some draft boards as high as top 5. I think that's a little ambitious.
Where are these draft boards that you?
ESPN.
No way.
ESPN has him at number 4. So yeah, we have him late lottery, right now. So all right, so that's not good news. I don't know. Obviously, yeah, I mean it's good in the sense that we're still in December, so he should still be able to hopefully play most of conference play, and hopefully it doesn't linger.
I really like Cody Williams. He has, not that I didn't think he would be good, but he has shown a lot more skill. I think, especially just spatial awareness of the court on offense and of defense than I certainly expected. And his ball movement has been really good. His kind of just court awareness, court mapping, I think has been pretty well. Not making necessarily outstanding passes, but always pretty much making the right pass on offense and being a little bit less of a ball stopper than I expected. So I think it's a decent loss for Colorado. They've looked really good entering Big 12 play. That's definitely going to be pretty impactful.
Right. Well, Pac-12 this year, Big 12 next year. But yeah, I agree with Williams. I definitely didn't have him nearly as high before the preseason. I think I probably had him in the 30s. I was thinking that his offensive game just wasn't polished enough, and I thought he was going to struggle on that end. And he did at first, but then he really turned it on. In some games, he really, and against good opponents, he had some really nice games. So he was definitely trending in the right direction. Yeah, so that's unfortunate for Colorado, but they still kicked the crap out of Miami in Brooklyn over the weekend without him. So who would have thunk?
Maybe Miami just a little bit of a down year for the Hurricanes.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of the topics we'll touch on later on. Efton Reed, good news for Wake Forest. They're starting to get their guys back, and Reed was cleared to play by the NCAA before this whole court ruling, and he had a really nice debut versus Rutgers. So that's another element to a Wake Forest team that already looks good and still arguably is still missing its best player in Monsantos. So watch out for Wake Forest. Efton Reed, former four-star, who's never really lived up to potential. But he's never, I don't know if I'd have to look up his stats, but I don't think he's ever really gotten steady playing time. Anyway, seems to have found a home at Wake Forest.
I like what Wake Forest has going this year. I feel like they're pretty balanced, and I think he just is going to continue to add to it. And like you said, their best player still coming. I feel like I remember when we did the preview, Wake Forest was the ACC team that had the widest variance because they had injuries, they had these transfers,
right?
And I mean, they seem to be, at least I think there's a really solid foundation there, and definitely not going to be an easy team to play come ACC play.
And I wouldn't be surprised if they finish top 4 in the ACC.
I think that's super realistic.
Yeah. So West Virginia, who's 4-5, finally is getting some good news, and they're getting it in bunches. Cook, is back. He had some kind of health issue. We're not sure what happened there. They never really went into detail. Collapsed on the court during practice, and but yeah, he's played in their last 2 games. Kerr Kriisa's suspension for being naughty at Arizona ends, so he will debut this Saturday at UMass versus UMass. And of course, Raekwon Battle was just given his second denial, and he filed a lawsuit in federal court over being denied being able to play. And he seemingly has a pretty good argument. Under the NCAA's current rules, but no matter, it looks like he can at least play for 14 days. So and also the kid played with Amoni Bates at Eastern Michigan. Noah Farrakhan. He too is actually not allowed to play because of this ruling. So he too will at least be allowed to play for 14 days if he chooses to go to that route. Lastly, on the injury roster front, we got DJ Wagner and Aaron Bradshaw, both now healthy for UK, and Ugana Onyensu, who's been out for a long time with an ankle, also could be back this weekend versus UNC. So how do you like how this Kentucky team's looking now that they have Bradshaw and soon they'll have Onyensu? Whew.
I mean, I really like Bradshaw's first game. I liked his energy, his activity, his hands around the rim. He had two pretty unbelievable catches in the fast break, where he just like tough passes, catches them, goes up with them, and that stuff's all impressive. Honestly, my biggest concern, and this comes from a Calipari quote, where Calipari says, quote, "We've got to find out the best way to play with two bigs. We don't want to play high-low and jam up at the lane, though." And it's just like, that's my biggest concern is then once these bigs starts coming back, he's going to try to play Onyensu and Bradshaw together. And I don't see how that's going to work. I feel like everything we've seen from Kentucky this year has shown that this like fast pace, upbeat, get the threes up.
Small ball. Trey Mitchell playing center. Yes.
I love Tiero as a 4.
He's losing playing time because of all this.
Which sucks because like I actually think, oh man, I like sneaky think he could be an NBA player.
Oh, I think so. I definitely think so.
Yeah, like yes. So I think he's a great college 4. So I mean, I think it's good for their health, right? Like you want to see teams be healthy and not have to play under man. But if this means that UK is going to go back to playing two bigs and not shooting threes, like I think that probably is a detriment to their national title hopes.
I agree. I agree with you 100%, Caleb. I really, they are, playing, this excellent ball with all those guards so fast. Trey Mitchell has been playing, lights out. And yeah, I think actually the new guys, and they still have another 7-footer who's waiting to get cleared.
I don't know if he'll play this year.
The European guy, yeah, he may never get cleared. Yeah. Kind of like Ennis Cantor never got cleared.
All right, here's a Kentucky question. Who's the best NBA prospect on their roster?
Oh, I don't know if it's Shepherd or Dillingham. I don't know. I haven't made up my mind. What do you think?
Whew.
Shepherd's impressed me probably more often, but
he's been more impressive to this point. But does that mean he's got the high
right? But Dillingham's speed, is just incredible.
How many guys that size are successful in the NBA though?
Yeah, that's a problem.
Like so I'm a big. You and I had this conversation right before we ever hopped on the podcast together about just the differences in style between like the NBA, the international game, and college. And I always tell this story, big NBA defender, I am. And I always tell this story of Trey Burke. Trey Burke, Mr. Basketball in Ohio. So he's the best player in Ohio in his high school season, goes to Michigan, like takes him to the Final Four. I don't think they win a national title, but he wins like player of the year one year. And like, so he's the best player in high school. He's the best player in college. And then he can barely make an NBA roster, right? Like he just like stays around the 12th guy because he's so small. And then in Columbus, there's this big pro-am tournament, like summer league tournament called the Kingdom League, right? And so it's a bunch of like really good college players, up and coming high school players, Dayton, Cincinnati, Columbus, all send players up. There's people who are like playing overseas, like professionals overseas that come back. And so it's a bunch of really, really high level basketball. And Trey Burke comes in every year. Like still, I think this past year, he's not in the NBA this year at all. No. And I think this past year he broke the championship game scoring record with like 50 points. And it's like, that's absurd that he has to be at that level. Like he is that level when it comes to his peers and he still can't get a consistent run in the league, and so that's why I'm like, it's going to be tough for people like Dillingham to be successful.
I think I think if you have speed like him, it might just be enough. It might just be enough.
He has to shoot too. I mean, pretty well, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. But I'm saying that's, he kind of has like extraordinary speed. So assuming he can shoot a reasonable clip, I think that can overcome his height. Also, I don't personally know his wingspan, so that can always be a plus too. That can make up for the height. All right, so now we'll move on to some interesting questions, trends, and observations we've made since the last show. And I put a list out here of mid-majors that are just really, really hot, really, really playing well. And I must admit, I haven't seen the only team I haven't seen play on this list is Indiana State.
Same, unfortunately.
Okay. But and basically, I wanted to ask you, who do you think is the most dangerous from this group? And man, these are teams you just don't want to face in the NCAA tournament. It's James Madison, Dayton, Grand Canyon, Indiana State, New Mexico, St. Joe's, and Princeton. So, of this group, and if you haven't seen them all, that's forgivable because I haven't. Who really has impressed you, and you really think is a team to really maybe win a couple of games in the NCAA tournament?
I mean, there's kind of the top group to me as far as impressive has to be James Madison and St. Joseph's. I think you look at their win, like Villanova and Michigan State have to be the best wins amongst the group. Villanova coming to St. Joseph's, Michigan State coming to James Madison, and then St. Joseph's also played Kentucky pretty tough.
Took them to overtime.
Yeah.
At their place.
Had a real shot to win. They beat Penn, who I know Penn beat Villanova. So is that like the same feather as them beating Villanova? Maybe. And they just beat Princeton, so like Princeton's in this list.
You're right. They just knocked Princeton from the undefeated ranks.
Yeah, so like St. Joseph's to me is super impressive. Really like their balance. They've got 5 guys in double figures, shooting about 35% from 3. I'm a big love me a team that can just like light it up from downtown. And if you want to talk about a team that plays fast and lights it up from downtown, you got to look at James Madison putting up almost 40%. As a team from the 3-point line. So those are kind of the top 2 to me. I think New Mexico is a team down the road that could be really impressive. I don't love any of their wins yet. Like I think coming into the year, we would have viewed like a St. Mary's tough game as like a good loss. But St. Mary's just like hasn't been as good as we expected. New Mexico also has 5 guys in double figures. Really like what Jamal Mashburn Jr. has been able to do from a scoring perspective down there. He's been super efficient from every part of the court. So I think New Mexico can be really good. I don't necessarily know if I think they're the most impressive yet. Dayton, my hometown team, I mean, they've been going the entire year without their starting point guard and have some really good wins. And even the Houston loss was like pretty tough. Like Houston did it.
They hung in there.
They lost by 14, but like Houston.
Yeah, but that game was close. That game was closer than that if you watched it.
Oh yeah. And like, they lost by 5 to Northwestern, who beat Purdue, and it was at Northwestern. So like their 2 losses are both to really good teams. Like SMU was a tough win. St. John's was a real tough win. LSU, like they got some good wins. I just don't think without their starting point guard, it's an uphill battle, I think, for them to be successful in the postseason. But those would be kind of the teams that stick out and like what I've been liking so far. What about you?
I am right there with you with your analysis. I really like St. Joe's. I think Dayton, even without Malachi Smith, is still a team to be reckoned with. But I think the team with the most upside on this list is, and you kind of hinted that, is New Mexico. The they did get two nice wins back to back last week. Santa beat UCSB and Santa Clara, and Santa Clara was at Santa Clara. Santa Barbara is favored to win the Big West, which has actually been doing pretty well this year in out-of-conference games. But here's why I really like New Mexico. If you look, first of all, when they lost to St. Mary's, which is their only loss, they didn't have their best player. That's Jalen House. And he missed the first few games. And it seems like it's taken him a while to kind of get in the groove. But then you throw in there, as soon as kind of House got in order, Mashburn went down. And Mashburn's missed the last few games. And so you have guys like freshman Jaden Toppin, freshman True Washington playing really well for this team. Sophomore point guard Donovan Dent playing really well for this team. So you got three guys that are carrying the load as underclassmen, where their two best players from last year still haven't really hit their stride, and one's not playing right now. So, I think New Mexico could be a real problem down the road once they get healthy.
I love their guard play. I love their depth. I thought True coming in this year was a pretty sneaky pickup, and saw him play last year at Arizona Compass Prep out in Arizona. And I thought he could have gone to not a better school, but I thought he could have gone to a Power 5 team, Power 5 conference team. And he has been great for them.
Yeah, and he's a 4-star.
Same with Toppin as a freshman.
He's 4-star. So yeah. Toppin's been especially good on the boards and defensively. It's just been a real nice combination. And of course, you have Nelly Jr. Joseph coming in from Iona, who's been solid for them at center. So a lot to like about this team. All right, so let's talk about teams that are going in the wrong direction, and maybe not so much hugely in the wrong direction, except for maybe one of these teams. But lately, these 5 teams have not looked very good over the last week or so. That's Alabama, Arkansas, Miami, and Michigan State, who we seem to talk about every week, and USC. Which of these teams, I know you said last week, and actually, I'm actually starting to believe you, because when you said it last week, I raised my eyebrow. And I'm like, nah, no way is Michigan State missing the tournament. But they lost again. They lost again to Nebraska. And Nebraska's not a bad team, but Nebraska's not a good team either. Michigan State just looks like a complete mess.
They got handled by Wisconsin too. It wasn't.
Oh yeah. That game. I mean, they actually made it close in the second half for briefly. I think they pulled within 3, but I think Wisconsin basically had the lead from start to finish. And pretty much Michigan State just. Yeah, so maybe we don't talk about Michigan State this week, because they seem like the obvious answer to this question. So let's talk about Alabama, Arkansas, Miami, USC. All of these teams have lost multiple games in recent weeks. Who's concerning you the most there?
I have a cop-out answer, so I'm going to let you go first.
Wow. I think Miami and USC are going to be all right, though I think it was obvious against Colorado that this team doesn't have a bench. This team lacks height, and all their height is on their bench, and their bench is super inexperienced. I'm not saying that they can't be good players. They could. They're all high recruits, but their sophomore and freshman is where, that was what their benches consist of. And once Amir fouled out of that Colorado game, I mean, they were already starting to lose it. They just seemed disinterested against Colorado. But when Amir went out, it was over. I mean, Colorado just ran away with that game. So do I see Miami getting back to the Elite 8 again this year? I don't think so. But I still think they're going to be a good team. USC, I'm still holding out hope because Collier's been struggling. Ronnie just got his feet wet, or maybe a toe wet, played 16 minutes against Long Beach, and of course they lost that game. But again, there's hope for that team because they do have a lot of young guys, especially Bronny, that can still work into the mix. But Arkansas and Alabama, man, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that they're not tournament teams, but I think Alabama's definitely a tournament team. But man, beside Mark Sears, this team really doesn't have a lot of offense, and they also don't play great defense. But Arkansas seems to have a problem Kentucky always has. And, we were talking about, don't play Onyensu and Bradshaw together. Well, Arkansas is playing like 11 guys, and like there's no continuity. I mean, Devo Davis, who's been like a stalwart there, wasn't playing the other day when they were getting their butt kicked by Oklahoma. What's his face? The freshman or the transfer from Louisville, L. Ellis. L. Ellis didn't play in the second half. Somebody else didn't play. Oh, Brazil. Brazil is nursing an ankle, so I assume that's why he didn't play much in the second half, is because he's still overcoming that ankle strain. But it doesn't seem to me that Arkansas has really figured out what their rotation is, who their best players, and they're just kind of like throwing people out there. And I really am a big believer of tightening rotations, and having guys have a similar role every night, knowing what they're going to do. And Arkansas, I mean, they played three bigs. I just don't think I'm drawing a blank on what's the coach's name? Musselman. And of course, in that Oklahoma loss, Musselman lost his mind and looked like a complete idiot, which made the whole situation even worse. But that's the team I'm worried about. I don't think Arkansas is nearly as good as we thought they were. That's my opinion.
That perfect segue right into my cop out. My cop out answer is that like all of five of these teams are particularly are very talented. They're just incredibly flawed. Like all five of them have some pretty massive flaws. And so like, I mean, if you look through like let's take out Michigan State for a minute. So let's just look at USC, Miami, Arkansas, and Bama. Like none of the four of those teams have bad losses, right? Like Bama's lost to Ohio State, who's a lot better than we thought. Clemson, who's better than we thought, and Purdue. Those are all good losses. They're probably going to lose to Creighton. They're probably going to lose to Arizona. So they're going to go into conference play with 5 really tough losses. We just talked about Indiana State. We didn't talk a ton about them because you and I haven't had a chance to see them, but we mentioned Indiana State as this like mid-major up-and-coming team that like Alabama beat by 20. They put up 102.
That was Indiana State's only loss on the year.
Yeah, so like even this team, like they're not a bad loss there. If we look at like Arkansas has beaten Duke, which like maybe Duke quite isn't as good as we thought, but they've lost to Memphis, they've lost to North Carolina. Oklahoma is better than we thought. UNC Greensboro is typically a pretty decent program. That might be the worst loss of the bunch.
Yeah, definitely.
USC has some like head scratching ones, but they've also beaten Kansas State. So I just think they're all really flawed teams. The team that I'm most worried about, honestly, also is probably Arkansas. And I see this with both Arkansas and Bama, that it just feels like a collection of talent without a structure for both of them. I think Alabama's structure with their identity in the offense and getting the threes up and playing fast and go. I think that structure is probably a little better than what Musselman's doing. But the talent is so good with Sears and Estrada and Grant Nelson and Rylan Griffin. And like people are talking about Jaron Stevenson as a future NBA player. Sam Walters is so skilled coming off the bench. Like all four of these, I mean, that's just Bama, but all four of these teams have a lot of talent. I just don't think they're.
So does Michigan State. Just not showing up.
That's the worst. But I don't think any 4 or 5 of these are Sweet 16 teams. Like, I don't think any of them are the top 15 teams in the country. But if one of them, like if you told me Arkansas makes the Sweet 16, I wouldn't be terribly surprised. Right?
I would at this stage.
I mean, that's fair. I think they look incredibly disorganized on offense and defense. But again, like you look at the talent that they have between Khalif Battle and Tremont Mark and Brazil and Debo Davis and L. Ellis and Chandler Lawson, and they've got.
But the thing of it is, they all can't play at once.
Coming off the bench.
They all can't play at once, and they're all like same level players. Like none of them stand out. You know, I mean, Debo Davis is a really good defender, but you know, offensively he's limited. Battle's a really good offensive player, but you know, defensively not so much.
My point is, there's just there's like with all of these teams, there's a lot of talent. And I think they just all have major flaws. I think Alabama and Arkansas seems to be a little bit more structural around the collection of talent, where the collection doesn't quite fit together super well. But, like, still a lot of talent there. And if they can find lightning in a bottle when it comes to tournament time, like, they can make a run.
Right. Here's what's interesting about Arkansas. Like, I could tell you, like I could say about Miami is they're too small. They don't have anybody, consistent coming off the bench. Alabama, I could say they rely too much on Sears. Grant Nelson isn't pulling his weight, and they don't have a shot blocker. But with Arkansas, I can't say any of those things. They have all those things, but nobody is getting any consistent minutes.
And they don't have I think the big thing for them is also, in addition to the inconsistency coaching, is they don't have a real point guard.
Yeah, but L. Ellis has played enough point, and Debo Davis, ran that team much of the year last year. I mean, him and Black shared those responsibilities.
Anthony Black was the point guard.
Yeah, he was.
Davis is like a combo guard who can handle the ball and knows how to run it. Like, just because you can run a pick and roll, it doesn't mean you're a point guard.
Mm-hmm.
I can run a pick and roll. I can hit the weak side guy if the weak side guy's man sags in, but that doesn't make me a point guard.
Yeah, true.
And I think that's the problem, is they don't have anybody who can get the puppies organized and really actually run an offense and get guys. Like, it is a talent to get offensive creators the ball in spots for them to score, and they don't have anybody to get the offensive guys in the spot to score. It's just a bunch of guys going and getting their own.
Right. Yeah.
Which, like, can work, right? Like, Tremont Mark went for 35 or whatever against Duke and had the game of his career, and they won a really tough game. And so it clearly can work, and they can find lightning in a bottle and be successful in the tournament. I'm probably more worried about them than anybody else, similar to you. But I still think there's a collection of talent there, and I think it kind of is emblematic of what we've been talking about with all four of these teams, that there's just talent, there's just serious flaws.
Right. All right, so let's talk about some surprising teams that actually have worked their way into the top 25. And we've talked about some of these teams a little bit before, but I guess I'm asking, which of these teams do you really think is for real? I think the only one with multiple losses is Utah. Northwestern only has one loss. Clemson's still undefeated. BYU just lost their first game, I believe.
Iowa State has two.
Oklahoma's still undefeated. So there we go. Clemson, BYU, Iowa State, Oklahoma, Northwestern, and Utah. Who has impressed you the most, and who do you really think is going to be able to continue to be a top 25 team and carry that on?
Clemson's probably the most likely to carry it on, right? Because BYU, Oklahoma, Iowa State, and Utah are all going to beat themselves up. And Northwestern, I think, is going to take some L's in the Big Ten. And I think the ACC probably the easiest, right? like I'm saying the ACC is probably the easiest of the conferences represented in this group, and
Well,
so Clemson.
Utah in the Pac-12, I would say, is probably, I don't know, it's probably close between the Pac-12 and the ACC.
Yeah, I still really like Clemson. I like their balance. PJ Hall's had an absolutely incredible season. Love what Booby's doing at Northwestern too. I love some guard play. Man, I think my pick though for like the best team, especially come tournament time, like the team most likely to do some damage, is actually Iowa State.
Yeah,
I really like their guards. I really like their depth. I really like their balance. I think they play incredibly tough defense and have the guards to score in the NCAA tournament. But I don't know. That's me. So Clemson and Iowa State, I think I've talked myself into.
I agree. We're thinking a lot alike today. And
I don't like that.
The interesting thing about Clemson is, they haven't had Alex Hemingway, who's one of their better 3-point shooters. And he's been out. They've also, Jack Clark was their top incoming transfer. He's been out. So we haven't even seen Clemson at its best. And Chase Hunter actually has been kind of struggling, especially of late. So I think Clemson's got more to give. I think, Iowa State, they were so impressive last year as a defensive team, but man, sometimes they couldn't throw it in the ocean. This team's different. This team could score. I really like Oklahoma. I've been impressed. They're not winning with smoke and mirrors. The one thing about Oklahoma is they're not a great shooting team. And that's what I think might end up hurting them. Utah's solid, Northwestern solid, and I think you're right about BYU. BYU is going to probably take some lumps, but BYU also hasn't been healthy. They are missing Fuz Traore, and who's arguably their best player, and they also have been missing probably their most interesting transfer, the kid from the Big West, Baker, what's his name? Shoot, I can't think of his name right now. But and he doesn't have any stats because he hasn't played yet this year. But he's a great shooter, and that team already has plenty of shooters. So again, BYU's not at full strength. So, I'm thinking right now, I don't know about you, the only team I don't think is going to might not make the NCAA tournament is Utah. I'm not completely buying in on Utah. They did beat BYU the other day, but as I said, BYU was not at full strength, and it was at their place. So yeah, but everybody else looks pretty good. But I think Northwestern, BYU will come down to earth a little bit. But I agree, Clemson and Iowa State are probably the best of this list. All right. So before we wrap up the notebook, I went through and I did this yesterday. So this includes all games played except for last night, Tuesday night. So I went through and looked at all the teams out of conference records. Now, it doesn't necessarily, it's not a pure gauge because I'm just going pure won and loss. There's no telling. I'll give you an example. The Big South is 10th. There are 32 conferences, and the Big South is 10th with a winning percentage of 60%. But I can tell you right now that the Big South is not playing the same schedule as the Big East. For example, the Big East already has gone through the Big Ten, the GABA games against the Big Ten, and then they had the battle with the Big 12. So a lot of those teams have played most Big East teams have played at least one Big Ten opponent and at least one Big 12 opponent, not to mention all the other games we've seen like UConn and Creighton play good opponents. So I think there's a difference in strength of schedule. But what stood out to me was Big 12. We've been talking about it ever since season started. Big 12 is just like running away and crushing everybody. And they have the best out-of-conference winning percentage at 80.3%. But next in the list is the Mountain West. It's 72.8. And you know what, Caleb? This is exactly what happened last year, because I'd be curious to know the quality of those wins, because last year the Mountain West did pretty good out of conference on a whole, but they didn't beat anybody. Okay, so they won a lot of games out of conference, but they didn't win any big games. And I hope that's not happening again this year. And I'll tell you why. Because the RPI loves you winning games. It doesn't care who you play in a lot of different ways. Like there's a lot of other metrics like the Sagarin ratings, which still aren't up. I don't know if Jeff Sagarin stopped doing his ratings, but they really take into consideration who you played and how much you beat them by. But so I hope the Mountain West doesn't, like last year, they got 4 teams in, and with the exception of San Diego State, they all got knocked out in the first round. And that's been a trend for the Mountain West for the past few years. So other conferences that are hoping to get more than one team in that are doing really well, the Missouri Valley, Indiana State's doing well, Southern Illinois is doing well, Drake is doing really well. And Bradley's doing well, and the Atlantic 10, which we talked about, St. Joe's, but also Duquesne's been playing well. Richmond's been playing well. And I know I'm probably forgetting some other teams in the A10 that have been doing well. Dayton's another one. But they are ninth on the list. So the Missouri Valley are actually better than the Pac-12 and the Big East, and Atlantic 10 is just right below. And then I'm going to finish up by saying there are 2 conferences that generally get multiple bids, but are lower down this list, and I think are in danger of maybe only being 1 bid conferences this year. And that's the American Athletic. That's Memphis, basically Memphis and Florida Atlantic. Now, the moves that Memphis has just made, they're probably going to be in the tournament unless something really goes wrong. So the American Athletic probably will get 2 teams, but the West Coast Conference, they've only won 58% of their out-of-conference games, which puts them in line with conferences like the Southern Conference and the American East. And so with St. Mary's not playing well, I mean, they did beat Colorado State the other night at Colorado State, but generally St. Mary's still doesn't look quite right. This could be a 1-bid conference, Gonzaga and nobody else. So
I mean, I think Gonzaga's also had a couple more out of conference losses than we're used to. I think there was a lot more. There was a fair amount of hype around someone like San Francisco too.
Yeah,
with some of the teams, and like they've taken 3 losses to.
They played a pretty tough schedule though, but
but Boise, Grand Canyon, Arizona State, they've got some quality wins. Minnesota, Vanderbilt's not good. DePaul's might be the worst Power 5 team in the country.
DePaul,
but I don't know
who DePaul just beat. They won a game. Finally.
Oh yeah, against Louisville in Side note, did you see the thing today that happened with Louisville?
Yeah, with the kids said when he was leaving, and then he's like, "No, I'm not leaving."
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's like the epitome of the dog sitting in the room with the room on fire, and he's like, "Oh, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine."
Yeah. So, what? Any other comments about this list? Obviously, the major conferences are, the 6 big conferences they're all in the top 8, and the other 2 to sneak into the top 8 are the Missouri Valley and the Mountain West.
I mean, that's not terribly surprising. I think the Big Ten looks pretty decent this year, even outside of Purdue. Like, Ohio State's got some good wins. Oh, my mind has just gone blank. Indiana's got a win or 2. I think the ACC and the SEC, I think it'll be interesting to see who kind of comes out of those 2. I feel like both of those conferences, like the ACC historically has been so strong, and then I feel like the last couple of years, the SEC's kind of there's been some real depth, I think, in the SEC, and I think this year the high end talent in the SEC isn't quite there. So I'm just kind of like interested to see.
I think the ACC is back. I mean, we said this during our preview show.
The ACC is back.
Yeah,
the Atlantic Coast Conference.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think they're back. We said during our preview show that I think you agree with me. I said I think the ACC is going to be a lot better than people expect this year, and they're going to not get just like 4 bids like they've been getting. They're going to get like 5 or 6 bids this year, maybe even 7. So I think the SEC is a little overrated right now.
They just don't have there's not the, like, who's the best team in the SEC?
Kentucky.
Like, if you were to rank teams based on national title contention, like, who's the, like, legitimate national title contentions? Are they what, like 14th?
No.
Higher?
Top 10.
Top 10? Maybe like 9 or 10?
But they're the only team I see in the SEC that could win the national title.
Yeah, like the SEC only has 2 teams in the top 25 right now, right? They've got Tennessee and Kentucky.
And right. I forgot about Tennessee. Tennessee could also win the national title.
You think?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see.
They were one of my Final Four teams.
I know. Vescovi needs to play better. Vescovi needs to play better, and
which he did the other day.
Who's the Ziegler? Ziegler's back.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to make a huge impact. But like that's it. The ACC's got 6 teams in the top 25.
Right.
And I think North Carolina is really, really, really good. And I said that during our preview show.
Yeah.
Duke is underwhelmed. 100% Duke is underwhelming, but we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, we'll move on. So, I don't know how much we could talk about this because we don't know a lot of the details. I was just curious on your thoughts on the NCAA proposed rule changes. Of course, the NCAA is under a lot of pressure from various lawsuits that's been brought against them about, denying players the right to earn money and denying players the right to move about as they will. And the new NCAA president came out this week and said, let's create a subdivision of the richest teams in college sports in D1, and they're going to be allowed to pay their players. It's a lot more complicated than that. So I don't really, and I don't think it's not all been ironed out. This is just a proposal right now. And the only thought I had was, is this somehow going to really change the balance of power? And bear with me on this. I think they have to pay at least half. They have to pay at least half of their scholarship players. Now, they also have to pay women's sports, too. So, and they have to pay them the same as the men. But I'm just wondering if they pay every scholarship athlete, are there going to be a lot of, 12th men on these teams who are getting money and they're okay with not playing? Just because they're getting paid, and
to get like $100,000 a year to sit the bench.
Right, exactly. And as opposed to maybe going to a school like Indiana State and being a star. So that's the one thing I'm concerned about.
I'm so fascinated to see what it would look like for a postseason.
Postseason's not supposed to change. It's not. That's what's
how. How is the postseason not going to change?
They're saying nothing will change. The only thing that could possibly change would be the Division I football playoff. So instead of doing the 12-team thing they're proposing for starting next year, they're saying you guys could maybe do something different if you want to. But But as far as basketball goes, the March Madness stays the same, and that's where I get concerned because I can see all these guys sitting on Kentucky's bench, even though they could be playing somewhere else. And I guess that already happens to some extent. Look at all the players on Arkansas and Kentucky that could be like regular 30-minute starters somewhere else, and they're at Arkansas and Kentucky. So
I don't know. I'm sure something will change. I like the idea of the current setup with NIL and just kind of it almost allows the market to do it a little bit more than the schools to get involved. Having it go through the boosters and these like NIL collectives feels, I don't know, feels a little more grassroots and kind of like, hey, it's the community and the people around the programs who want the programs to be successful, and so that is why, as opposed to like more of this structured top-down approach from the schools. What in reading a little bit about it, one of the things it does say is that schools would pay to use images or videos of the players on social media. I think that's like an interesting angle that like that kind of facet of it I think could be good. I think, like you said, we will probably need some more concrete details as to like what will this actually look like, because right now it's just a couple of different theories and ideas, and I think we'll need those concrete details to like really have a hand. And even then, like we'll have these ideas of what it's going to look like, right? And like the rules are actually going to change, and then the rules get put into practice, and there's going to be things that we don't expect to happen.
Oh, sure.
And things are going to get moved around again. And it's kind of just this revolving door.
Right. Now, what you were talking about, I think one of the things they're concerned about with this collective approach that's now being used by the third-party system is those same people could give money, but instead of giving it to their special fund or whatever, they would just give it to the school, in which would get redistributed to the players.
Sure.
So I think one thing you're going to run into is there's going to, with the Title IX stuff, with women getting the same amount of money, that might create some friction. I think it also
give Caitlin Clark all the money. Caitlin Clark can have it all.
No, but what I'm saying is, if you have a sport like, that maybe brings in 1,000 fans to a game, and then you have, the football team that brings in 100,000 fans to the game, people are going to be, why is she getting the same money as me when she's definitely not bringing in as much money as I am? So the other thing you're going to see is, if the NCAA doesn't say you have to pay everybody, says you have to pay half of your scholarship athletes. So that's usually 10, 12 guys. So let's say it's 12. So imagine your player number 7. Player number 6 gets $50,000 a year. Your player number 7, and maybe you play one less minute a game than him and have similar stats, and you get nothing. That's going to create friction too.
But then you'll have situations like you said, like you made the point, like why would do you think a guy will be okay being the 12th man on a bench if he's just making money when he can go somewhere else and be a star? And so if that's the case where like teams only pay half their players, I don't think you're going to see guys being like, I'm just going to sit the bench,
right?
At Baylor. Like I'm not going to be the 8th guy at Baylor when I can go to TCU and be the 4th guy. Or something like that.
Right. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Do they pay everybody? Do they just pay half? I just think paying half is going to create, if they do it that way, it's going to create a mess, a locker room mess. So we're going to wrap up the College Hoops Notebook by getting recruiting news. Last week you had some great news for Rutgers fans. Well, actually, was it a done deal at that point?
It wasn't. I didn't actually think it was going to come as fast as it did, and then it was either the day after we recorded or like 2 days after we recorded that he committed. He officially committed. Dylan Harper officially committed to Mizzou. If you did know what we're talking about,
Right.
number 2 player in the class. So Rutgers now has the number 2 and the number 3 player in the class, both coming to Rutgers next year.
That is so exciting for people around here. And I'm going to be an hour away, and I'll be able to see those guys plenty next year. So I'm excited. What other recruiting news? Anything else interesting to talk about?
I mean, the only the big news, I think it was today, 4-star point guard out of Columbia, Missouri, Aaron Rowe, formerly of Link Academy, played for Link last year when I think Link won the national title. Aaron Rowe committed to stay home to Mizzou. So that's a pretty big pickup. He's not the biggest point guard in the world. He's about 6 feet tall, listed generously at 160. But he's also a class of 2025 guy. Missouri's got a really interesting recruiting class coming in next year with 4-stars, 4 guys in the top 100,
Wow.
led by Anar Boateng, who I think is coming out of Little Rock Central, which I think is the same school Nick Smith came out of. And then they've got Peyton Marshall, who's about 7 foot, 300 pounds, coming out of Overtime Elite. Yeah, right. And they got a couple of wings as well. So between this year's class and next year's class, Missouri basketball seems to be, Dennis Gates is doing some good work in Middle America there.
Yeah. Wow. That's
so nothing crazy. That's about all I got. I think with the high school season really starting, and the big games starting to happen, we're not going to see a lot of commitments right now. We might see a couple of one-offs here and there, but I think most guys want to focus on their season and not on recruiting. So we can kind of throw in some high school games here and there as there's some big tournaments and big games, but I think a lot of the actual recruiting news might take a brief hiatus as the games are played.
And on a similar note, the NBA is now changed its own rules and is going to allow scouts.
They can do that.
They couldn't do that before to scout high school players, but now they will be allowed to. And the reason is because you have guys like James Wiseman, who you can't watch in high school officially, at least. And then he plays 3 games at Memphis and packs it in. Or you have other guys who just go directly from, say, high school to maybe Australia. So certainly would be nice to have a good idea what they're all about before you spend the money to go to Australia to see them. So and by the way, if you want, the NBA, I believe, sent out a press release, which I have to me with the list of events. It's not they can't go to every game, but there are certain events. And if you're interested in those events, because I think a couple are out your way, you probably already know about them. But anyway, I'll send you that list.
Yeah, you should still send it to me. Maybe we can work on something little. Yeah, we'll chat about it.
Right. All right, so let's move on to the stock report. And as always, we talk about who's hot and who's cold. And then we say whether they're hot or cold, whether we still are buying or selling their stock as an NBA draft prospect, as someone who will play in the NBA. So we'll start off with David Jones of Memphis, who's been rather hot of late, and you have to think that he might cool off with at least one with Tomlin coming into the team. Though they're different players, they're definitely different players. But Jones certainly is a very good rebounder. He's more of a wing, where Tomlin is more of a big. But he's averaging over 20 points per game. Shooting 46, 40, and 81 beautiful shooting splits, 6.3 rebounds per game, 2.4 steals per game. The only thing is he's a high turnover guy. But what do you think of David Jones?
I really want to buy David Jones stock. The first game this year that I watched of him was that Arkansas game where he went for 36. And I think that was the battle for Atlantis, and just was, I mean, I think he scored over half of Memphis's points and was just the most electric player in the court. Some incredible shot making from the outside. He hit like, I don't even remember, 8 of 13 from the 3-point line or something stupid. Do I actually want to buy his stock? I think that's tough. Like you said, high turnover guy. His handle's not the best. I think he's a little stiff athletically, and I think that's really going to show up in his defense. Do I think he could be like a G League guy as like a bench scorer? I think if he hits his highest outcome as a shooter, he could, like, some really incredible shot making, but he's been wildly inconsistent for his career. Like the last 2 years, he was basically a 30% 3-point shooter. And then this year he's a 40% 3-point shooter. So, like, if that jump is real.
Yeah, but I don't know if St. John's was just a total train wreck last year. I don't know. Nobody played well for that team last year.
Yeah, but like 30% over 2 years taken, like when we were talking about BYU earlier, and you were talking about them missing Traore, and so I'm like looking at the stats, right? And Traore is like 45% from the 3-point line, and then I look and he's taking like 0.5 threes a game.
Right.
All right, like that's not a sample size. David Jones was shooting 4.5 threes a game for two seasons.
True, that's true.
So the sample size is there.
He was below 30%.
Yeah, but like his free throw percentage also took a pretty, not like a huge jump, but like a 25% jump. Not 25%, 4%. A 4% jump. He went from like 78 to almost 82. So like maybe he just is becoming a better shooter, and then I think he's got a chance to like play professionally somewhere as an offensive player. I don't think with the stiffness athletically and his ball handling, it's going to be in the NBA though. So I guess that's as fun as he is, and I think like his story is why transfers and NIL is good for college. I don't see him as an NBA player.
Yeah, I'm I trend. I lean toward that direction, though. I guess I want to see how this season plays out and where he can take it. And I think the handle contributes to the turnovers, but it'll be interesting as he plays a more supporting role, or a more he'll be, moving forward with Tomlin. He might not have as much. He won't nearly have a high percentage of the offense. Usage percentage, for example, will probably go down. It'll be interesting because that's the kind of role he's going to have in the NBA, and if he could continue to knock down shots, he has good size. I think he has good overall pure athleticism. I think it's more the skill, at least like in terms of straight line speed, ability to jump. I think is pretty good.
It's just not there. It doesn't feel there functionally in tight spaces.
Yeah, right. I know what you mean. Yep. And that's why you see the high turnovers. So I guess I would say I'm selling, but this is a guy that nobody's talking about right now. Nobody's talking about him as being an NBA prospect. So is there a chance? Yes. So I'll say I'll put him on hold. If people were calling him like a top 30 pick, then I'd be like, I'm selling. He's not a top 30 pick, but I'll say I'll hold on that. All right. How about PJ Hall, Clemson, who's been the leader of that undefeated team? Big muscular guy, 6'10", about 250, has a nice shot, which has improved every season. He's now this year shooting 41% from deep and 55% from the floor. He's always been a steady, consistent free throw shooter, around 78% for his career. Yeah, he can rebound. He can block shots. He's energetic. He's a pretty good passer for a big guy. What's not to like about PJ Hall? I'm buying.
I'll buy as a third big. Like, I think he's a really great stretch option off the bench. I don't think he's got the foot speed to, like, he's got to be a drop big, right? Like, he's not switching. Does he have the verticality to really contest at the rim as a drop big? That's like another question. I think that's why he gets maybe pushed to that third big. But I think offensively, like, his ability to get offensive rebounds, his ability to shoot is, man, especially if he's shooting 40% from the 3-point line, like, and we want to talk about consistency. He was basically at 40% last year, and the year before that, 30%. But like, this is going on year 2, and he has an increase in 3-point attempts. Mm-hmm. So he's not only shooting better, he is shooting more, like almost double the amount of threes per game as he did last year. So I don't think he's going to be a starter or like maybe he cracks rotations, but like, I definitely think he's got pro potential.
Yeah. Athletically, first of all, he only measured 6'9" at the combines last year.
That's not surprising.
Yeah, that's typical. Doesn't have a great wingspan, 7'2", and athletically, where he was the worst was straight line speed.
2.3 blocks though is pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, that's nice.
That's impressive.
Yeah,
honestly.
And I really like his energy. I like how pretty his shot is. It wasn't always this pretty, but now he can really pull up. Like, he could pull up in transition and knock it down. Yeah, I'm liking what I'm seeing about PJ Hall. I think he's got a place in the NBA. Will he be a star? Will he be a starter? I don't think so. I doubt it very much, but I think he's got a place.
He also really just, like, the vibes is like the dude that you show up and you're like gonna go play some gym. You're gonna go play some ball at the rec, and you show up and this like big dude's just in the gym lifting, and you're like, hey man, we need a fifth. Like, you want to play with us? And then he's just like cashing from from like the half court line the whole game. Right. And you're like, I don't know what to do with this. Those are my vibes, and I'm super here for it.
Right. Yeah. The physicality and the energy is there for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're going to move on to one of your favorite players of all time, Hunter Dickinson. Hunter's just been playing lights out, 19.4 points per game, 64 from the floor, 58% from deep on 2 attempts per game, 74 from the free throw line, 12.6 rebounds per game. And 1.9 assists, blocks. He's never been a good shot blocker at 1.3. Is not good for someone his size, which is listed here at 7'2", 260. Is he really 7'2"?
That's a big man.
Is he really 7'2"? And he definitely plays with an edge. He's a grumpy old guy. He plays a little dirty. He plays He
was at the combine last year, measured at 7 foot barefoot.
Okay. There you go.
257, but his wingspan's only 7'3".
Right.
So PJ Hall, like you said, PJ Hall has a short wingspan, and he's 6'8" with a 7'2" wingspan, and Dickinson's 7 foot with a 7'2" wingspan. So
right. So Dickinson, that actually he wasn't at last year's. It was the year before. He was at the combine, I believe, wasn't it?
You might be right.
Yeah, I actually got to interview him there.
Are you buying or selling? Dickinson in the NBA?
If he keeps his shooting up, I think he could land as a third center. Kind of like an Alex Len type of guy. The one thing that really concerns me is the shot blocking. You certainly, if a guy's not going to be able to guard on the perimeter, you want him to be able to protect the rim. And for his career, and he's always he's averaged 31 minutes per game for his career, and he's only averaging 1.6 blocks. That's not bad, but for somebody his size, it should be like 2.6. So that's the lack of foot speed and the lack of verticality and length are concerns. Do I think he has a chance to get drafted? Yes. Do I highly doubt, unless something drastically changes on the athletic front, that he's going to be a big time impact player at the NBA level. So I guess I'm kind of buying. I'll buy a little.
Right. Not enough of the island to build a house on, but maybe you can like dock your boat there.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be the first to say he's been like absolutely incredible this year. I was a little harsh in our Big 12 preview with Hunter and kind of like my views on him for the year. And he has been incredible. Like, I did not expect him to be a 58% 3-point shooter. And even for his career, he's at 38%. And like, that's really good. I am still not buying NBA stock for a lot of the reasons that you said. His athleticism, his ability to defend the rim. And then, like, for his career, he's averaging more turnovers per game than assists.
Which is kind of funny because he does make some really nice reads and passes.
I don't know what it is. I just, like, I don't think he handles double teams particularly well. I think if he's operating from the high post or, kind of that traditional like wing post up area where he can kind of turn and survey the court, and there's some spacing, I think he can hit some really good passes there, but I don't think he handles double teams or pressure particularly well. And I think you've seen that a little bit this year with with Kansas. Just their lack of spacing has been at times an issue. But he's gonna, should he choose to do this, he is going to eat overseas.
Oh yeah.
You could tell me in 5 years he wins like the Adriatic League MVP, and I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, Adriatic League doesn't pay. He'd more likely go to the Spanish ACB or the French League or something like that.
Well, like if he ends up on like all American, not all American, but if he's like, one of the 5 best players of the year, I would not be shocked. I just don't think athletically or passing on offense, especially like it is a good and a bad thing. I think can be a black hole on offense, but I think both of those things I'm going to sell the stock.
I get you. I think on this Kansas team, he kind of has to carry them. They're just not a talented offensive team. So yeah,
none of their shooters panned out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what's the kid from Australia isn't doing bad, but he's not playing a lot. He's pretty scrawny right now. I just don't think he has the body right now to be highly productive. But anyway, all right, we're going to finish up the Who's Hot list with 2 red hot point guards. Maybe these 2 players, they're definitely in Player of the Year discussion nationally. And that's Tyler Kolek of Marquette. We'll start off with him. The other is Isaiah Stevens of Colorado State. So Kolek, 6'3", 190, and he's been averaging 15.3 points per game, shooting 56 from the floor, 45 from deep, which is a career high. 87 from the free throw line, also a career high. 5.3 rebounds per game, 5.5 assists, 1.7 steals, 0 blocks, 2.6 turnovers. Tyler Kolek is a magician. He's a pick and roll maestro. And I think, I criticized him preseason saying, offensively, I thought that that's an area he had to improve, not so much as a passer, but as a scorer. And I think he's done that. Been making some tremendous finishes at the rim. been shooting better from deep, been more likely to shoot from deep. I'm buying Tyler Kolek. And just on pure effort, intelligence, and basketball intelligence, I think I'm looking at, Peyton Pritchard like guy. Peyton Pritchard's probably more gifted offensively or as a scorer, but I think Kolek is more gifted as a playmaker. So yeah, I'm buying.
I love Kolek's game. He's so this Marquette team I'm obsessed with. I know they've taken some lumps, but I love the way that they play. It'll be really fascinating to see kind of what their path is in the tournament. And are they going to avoid a team like Purdue that's going to give them those rebounding problems? But Kolek's the head of that beast, just his ability to see the court, to know where everybody's at, to get guys in spots to score. I mean, like his offensive rating on the court this year. Do you want to take a guess on what it is?
130?
It's 128.
Well, I went about as high as I could think of,
But like to me and to me to like speak about, I think his toughness and his ability to be in the right positions, his defensive rating is 91.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which like
I will say defensive rating is often influenced by team defense. So
yeah, they both are on some
yeah, right.
But like I think he's definitely drafted. I think he even if he keeps this up, I think he pushes for a late first round draft pick. I really like Tyler Kolek and think he plays probably like 8 years in the league. Buying that for sure.
Great. All right. How about the other little guard who's littler, and that's Isaiah Stevens. He tested the draft waters last year, and I'll give you his exact measurements. Isaiah measured at 5'11" without shoes. So 6'4" wingspan. And the athletic test, he did very well. Very well. We have a database that tracks players, I think, all the way back to 2015 that I've been put together when we first started this. And so we have a system where we kind of rate them overall athletically and give them a percentile rank. So athletically, he measured at the 89th percentile of all the players we have in our combine database. So definitely has the athleticism. And this year, he's actually probably, I don't know if he's doing that much better than he did last year, but last year the team stunk and this year they're winning. So he's averaging 17.7 points, shooting 52 from the floor, 40% from deep, 81 from the line. All those numbers are mostly in line with what he did last year. 2.8 rebounds per game because he's a little guy, 7.5 assists per game, only 2.7 turnovers, also 1.6 steals. What do you think of Isaiah Stevens? He's certainly, the Colorado State's been one of the surprise teams in the country, and they were really rolling until they got knocked off by St. Mary's the other night.
I mean, I love watching Colorado State play. They had an incredible win against the Buffs earlier this year.
Right.
And Isaiah Stevens is much fun.
They beat Creighton by 20 on Thanksgiving Day.
I know. And I think especially when you talk about comparing him to last year, like I think that playmaking jump is really where you see, like, to me, that's where you see the difference in his ability to play make more. His usage is about the same, but his assist percentage is up and his turnover percentage is down. And so, like, that ability to make good decisions, I think, is really what's allowed that Colorado State team to excel. The
talent around him is improved. So, know, you can't make an assist unless your guys can put it in the bucket for you. So, yeah.
I am still going to sell this stock. I'm going to ask a question so Tankathon is kind of my go-to draft aggregate. I think it just like splits the difference between hot takes and cold takes and moving guys up too fast or too slow. So that's just like my first reference. But they have 67 guys on their draft board right now.
Right.
67. Of all of the point guards, what do you think is the shortest point guard they have listed?
6'3".
It's Reese Beekman at 6'2.5", and he is the last point guard ranked. He is the 56th ranked player of the 67 that they have ranked.
We have Beekman higher than that, but we have Beekman around 30.
Which is like, to me, the gap matters less than like the point of like,
it's not huge.
Stevens is he's just small. And I don't like, I'm not an NBA player, but I'm 6'3", 6'4", and I'm shooting over him. Right?
Right.
Like, I'm shooting over him. What's like, pick your big wing, right? Like, he's going to get hunted relentlessly. And so I think he's great. I think he's super fun. I love having these really good old teams be successful. I think it's what makes college basketball beautiful. But I'm selling his NBA stock.
I agree. He's a little smaller than Kolek. He's a little older than Kolek. He's a fifth-year guy, 23 years old. The numbers are there. The athleticism is there. But the size is a killer. So could he play as a number 3 point guard? Perhaps, probably not, but perhaps. And he'll get a shot. Marquise Noel of Kansas State right now is on a 2-way with Toronto. So if Marquise can get a shot, Isaiah Stevens will get a shot. I think ultimately, though, he's going to end up, G League or Europe, where he'll make plenty of money because he'll be a star when he finds the right level, where players aren't as big and aren't as athletic. Now, athleticism isn't his problem. So if he goes over to Europe, he'll be blowing people by. But, yeah. All right. So I am selling as well. All right. So let's move on to our Who's Cold list. And we'll start off with Dookie, and that's Mark Mitchell. And if you watched the game last night against Hofstra, he had his moments. Duke actually looked pretty good, very good offensively, a lot of great ball movement. And they turned up the heat defensively in the second half to make what was a pretty close game into a blowout. But with Mark Mitchell,
what was that you put in our group chat about the game last night before the game?
Oh, I said I'd take the 16. I said if I was a betting man, I would take the 16 plus. And the reason I said that is because Duke had come off a really easy win. Hofstra had just come off a loss. And I like that combination. But yeah. But yeah, and they hung with him for 30 minutes. But
I also would have taken Hofstra plus 16 as well.
Yeah. So with Mark Mitchell, good athlete, good size.
Not an NBA player.
Shot the ball pretty well last year, but this year, he's only 45% from the floor, only 6% from deep after shooting 35% from deep last year. And from the foul line, he's dipped down to 70%. None of his other numbers have really improved over last year. He's playing about the same number of minutes. I really liked Mark, when I first saw him in a lot last year. Shot hasn't improved, though. I don't
looks
see
worse.
Yes, it does. It does.
The energy transfer, it's like this weird slingshot motion.
Yeah. So you don't think no chance in the NBA? I wouldn't say that. But I'm definitely selling right now. Maybe I'll buy some later, but I'm selling right now. Jump shots just, I'm not seeing any improvement. I'm not seeing it in the shot. Like you said, looks worse than it did last year.
Yeah, I'm selling. He looks to to me to just be like overthinking things too much.
Mm.
I don't know if that's as much in the shot or just in the way that he is playing when he's on the court. But just like isn't aggressive, doesn't look confident, isn't looking to score.
Not even aggressive, not even ultra aggressive defensively.
Yeah, like he's second guessing if he's making the right rotations or if he's making the right contest at the rim. So I don't know what's going on behind the scenes there with that. That just seems to be my body language doctor read on watching him play this year. I was never buying his NBA stock ever, frankly. So I don't have any to buy or sell. But I do think his. So we confession to the listeners. We've got like this long list, and then we kind of talked about who are the guys that we want to chat about. On the long list, we also had another Duke player, Tyrese Proctor. And I think that those two guys are Mitchell and Proctor are going to be the key to can Duke win the title. I think those are kind of the X factors going forwards because I think Mitchell has to be confident. Like he has to be aggressive, both offensively and defensively. Like his ability to put pressure on the rim last year was really crucial to Duke's success at the second half of the season. And we just haven't seen that this year. So that's where I'm at with Mitchell. It's always weird to see a guy look like his shot is worse. Not just to shoot worse, but to like look like the shot is worse.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. So a guy who was frequent, you can find frequently on draft boards last year, and he's still hanging on in our 200 barely. Top 200 is Eric Gaines, UAB point guard. And the reason why I was still Eric didn't have the greatest year of last year, but when he played his best is when Jelly Walker got hurt. And so I thought, okay, Jelly Walker's not there now. And Eric Gaines is now it's gonna be his show to run. And one thing that could be working against him is UAB's just really doesn't have a lot of talent this year. So for a point guard, often flourishes along with his team. But Eric's, he's and the other thing, I mean, probably one of the fastest guards in the country, but at the same time, he can't shoot worth a damn. Very similar to Avery Anderson at TCU now. But nothing's improving for Eric really. I mean, he is shooting, get this, a career high from the field, 40%.
Whew.
But he's shooting 20% from three, 59% from the free throw line. You can't shoot under 70 as a point guard. And assist wise, he's 3.6 with 2.9 turnovers. This is a guy's 6'2". I actually think he might be a little bigger. I always thought Eric was
I always thought he pushed 6'4".
Yeah, I did too. But real GM, perhaps lists him at 6'2". I thought he was 6'3", 6'4" myself. Even so, just not. I know UAB sucks this year, which hurts him, but still, he's got to be doing better than this. These are horrible numbers.
Yeah, his efficiency has always been kind of bad, and like you said, like the team context is doing him no favors. I liked some of what I saw his sophomore year at LSU, but I thought he showed some good flashes of scoring, but never anything else from an NBA perspective that I'm particularly drawn to with Mr. Gaines.
I always liked his ability to attack the rim. I mean,
that's fair.
I mean, he was just explosive, off the bounce.
Yeah.
But yeah, but nothing else we can really say good about him at this point.
No. All right. Thoughts on L. Ellis?
Yeah. L. Ellis, last year averaged close to 18 points a game last year from Louisville, but it wasn't efficient doing so. He was a chucker. And that's why I was worried about how he was going to gel in with Khalif Battle this year, who's also a chucker, coming from Temple. Well, Ellis has seen his minutes drop from 36 last year with Louisville to 21 this year with Arkansas. He's not nearly as efficient. He's only averaging 7.4 points per game right now. He's, he showed some nice flashes as a passer. And his assist turnover ratio isn't bad. It's not great. 2.6 to 1.5. But just the efficiency is even worse than last year. He got benched in the last game. I don't think I've ever seen L. Ellis on a draft board. He's never been in our top 200. And I'm pretty convinced that he never will be in our top 200. I'm selling.
I never had any L. Ellis NBA stock either. So from an NBA perspective, I don't have any to buy or sell. I did think coming into the year that he could be a very important player for Arkansas. I think he's pretty gifted of a scorer. I know his efficiency hasn't been there, but good shot maker, I think, generally. And like you said, like maybe an above average playmaker at best. And I think the big change in context is like some of the stuff we talked about with Arkansas earlier. Their structure, their offensive structure doesn't really exist. They don't really have a point guard to kind of get guys in places to score. I think L. Ellis is best as an on-ball player. And last year when he was at his best, his usage was 30% or up. And now his usage is around 20%. So I think that's kind of where that consistency and that drop-off is. I don't particularly see that changing, which I think sucks because I did think he could be a good player this year for the Razorback. So some good, some bad. Little just mostly disappointment with his year this year.
Yeah, new team. He's asked to take on a completely different role.
Yeah.
It's just craziness. But even so, I mean, even if you would eliminate this year, you don't look at this year. You just look at last year, and you say, yeah, he can fill it up. But I'm not still not an NBA player. Okay, we're going to do our picks of the week. We lost Caleb, but we have Drew. So, and last week, Drew, who was leading the pack,
I want to talk about it.
had a not so.
I got betrayed.
Yeah, you went 9-10. Caleb went 10-9, and I had the best week, 13-6. So now I have moved in the first place, just slightly ahead of Drew by 2 games.
That Nova buzzer beater.
The Zags choking.
Yeah. All right, and guess who we start off with? We start off with the Zags. UConn is playing the Zags in Seattle, which is not a home game, right?
Technically not a home game.
Right, but it should favor them, of course.
Yes.
Caleb's going with UConn. Who you got, Drew?
I'm a lot of things. Delusional is not one of them. Give me the Huskies. I think this game has the potential to be pretty competitive. When the Zags play at their peak, they can beat anybody. But they've yet to string 40 minutes together against a really, outside of the USC game, they have not strung 40 minutes together. So I'm going to take UConn, who I think is just a little bit more experienced, is a lot more cohesive because that's a team that's been together. And I will take the Huskies.
So, what were you most disappointed about in that Washington loss?
I think that watching that game and the strength of this team to me is the forwards. They have 4 guys who are all 6'9" to 6'10", 6'11", maybe with EK, but that all do a little bit of different things, are a physical presence. I thought Ben Gregg was having another great outing, and Few has given the keys to the kingdom, especially with the Venters injury and Stromer still coming along. We don't have a lot of guards, to Hickman, who I still have a lot of issues with, and Nemhard, who has been bad. And in the second half, he basically allowed the 2 of them to dictate everything from the playmaking to the shot selection and gave them the greenest of lights. And not only did we shoot ourselves out of that game, I can live with you miss open threes. You know, I can live with the ball pops and a guy doesn't knock down a shot. I can live with another team having a great day defending the rim. Their center, I forget his name, had 5 blocks from UW.
Oh yeah, Kepnang.
Yes, Kepnang had 5 blocks.
Oh
So
my
I can look
God,
at all of that.
he was unbelievable.
That was the best I've ever seen him play. Probably.
Yeah,
I haven't watched a lot of
he,
UW.
he was a top 40, maybe a top 30 guy, but
Yeah.
he's been bothered by injuries
He
the
was
whole time.
he was unbelievable.
Tremendous.
And they completely went away from Ike, who was playing, who has quietly been very consistent on offense. He's not Drew Timmy, but he has done an admirable job of filling that low post role. They went away from Ben Gregg, who was having another good game. Braden Huff got 2 quick fouls, and he never got back in the game. And he's another guy who can give you some low post scoring. So Nembhard and Hickman have to figure it out and have to understand that, yes, you have the green light because you are the only 2 real guards left on this roster, but understand that neither one of you are that good that you can carry this burden on your own. Nembhard, you are a facilitator first, scorer second. Hickman, I'll admit, has been a better offensive player, but for every time he does something that I want to applaud, then it's a bad shot or it's a missed rotation on defense. I mean, he literally took 2
or it's or he's just standing around when he doesn't have the ball.
Exactly. It's like he took 2 charges. Awesome. Wore them. Going the other way, you get fired up. And then on the next possession is late to a closeout. Boom, wide open 3. There's no reason for them to have lost that game. They dominated the turnover battle. They were competitive on the glass. They had a good enough shooting night overall to where it wasn't like, oh, it's one of those nights. There's no reason they should have lost that game. The whole thing was a disappointment. And I'm not out on Nembhard. I still think he is a good player in a new system. And I keep going back to this team has 3 guys that are back, and only one of them is in the same role that he was in last year in Ben Gregg. So I think everyone's trying to figure it out. But is it the worst loss? No, that Huskies team has talent. I mean, they've got 2 transfer guards. Kepnang played really good. That is a solid team from the Pac-12. So it's a road game. It's not a brutal loss, but it sucks in that it should have been a 10-point win, was a 3-point loss, or whatever it was.
I don't know if you noticed, Mulcahy didn't play in the second half of that game. Or if he did, he played very little.
It was very limited. They put the ball in
Corin Johnson, I think he's a sophomore, I believe. And what I have heard recently, I can't verify its veracity, but I heard that Mulcahy, when he got to Washington, quickly found out that his NIL wasn't going to be what they advertised it was going to be, and he asked to come back to Rutgers.
I had heard rumblings as well that a transfer guard in the Pacific Northwest was disgruntled and very quickly assumed, because at first everyone was like, it's Nembhard. It was not. I very quickly assumed the same thing, that he went there and it wasn't even so much a playing time. It was just that he thought everything around his transfer, like I said, the NIL, was not what it was made to be. And in that second half, they went away from him and they put the ball in Wheeler's hands and let him run the show.
And Corin Johnson. But here's the most interesting part about that story was when he asked to come back to Rutgers, they told him no.
No. Well,
now, we've been comparing since the summer. We've been comparing the situation at Creighton with Coloma and Nembhard leaving to Mulcahy and Spencer leaving Rutgers.
Yeah.
And I just wonder is there something going on with Nembhard? Is he not happy there?
I mean, look, I just don't know if he's unhappy. I would be very disappointed because it was an immediate transition. Like I said, he got the keys to the car off the rip. He is playing damn near 40 minutes a game, despite him struggling in they played 10 games this year. They're 8-2, despite him struggling in probably 7 of those 10. And most of those games and most of the big games outside of, again, USC, where the whole team played well, him not being up to par, like, he hasn't been good. I won't say he's been horrendous, but the shooting hasn't really been there, and the turnovers some of them have been downright awful. So if he's unhappy, the team is still very competitive. There's talent on that team. So, like, if you want to argue that, you can very much so argue he left the better team, but he's not an NBA guy. So in a 2-year span, he's probably in a better situation in terms of the 2 years of the team he's going to have this year and then the team he's going to likely have next year. If he's unhappy, I just go, what are you unhappy with? You play as many minutes as you want. You are allowed to make as many mistakes as you want, and you never get pulled, whether it's because few can't pull you or won't pull you. There's no reason for him to be unhappy, in my opinion, at least in terms of a basketball sense. Obviously, look, there's more to life than basketball, but at this point, these guys are making moves predominantly for money and for basketball are probably the two biggest factors I feel like most of the time that come up. I know the Zags have a pretty solid NIL going for basketball. They have a very, very solid NIL deal. Historically, the Zags teams have been pretty tight-knit. They don't historically have a history of a lot of disgruntled guys. Mm-hmm. So I'm just trying to figure out, your brother was a legend there and is very well beloved by that community. So I'm just trying to figure out, if you're unhappy, what is it? Because the only thing that I'd be unhappy with is my play. And it's all stuff that you can control in your shot selection and turnovers.
Right. I one thing that comes to my mind is, damn, if I was with Creighton, I'd be on a Final Four contender. Maybe doesn't think Gonzaga's a Final Four contender.
Yeah, I mean, with Ventures going down, their ceiling unilaterally just plummeted. Because as much as I think Dusty's going to be great, you don't replace a guy who was still a Division I player of the year in a conference with a freshman, unless that freshman is a
skinny freshman.
Yeah. I think Dusty is going to be a 4-year guy when it's all said and done. I think he's going to be better than Aiden Mahaney, who everyone loves. When it's all said and done. But he's a freshman. He's still an 18-year-old kid, like maybe 19, depending on age. He might be older for his class, but it's like you can't. That's not a one-to-one replace. Venters was limited. He wasn't going to go and average 16, 17 a game like he did at Eastern Washington, I believe.
Yeah.
But he was still going to come in and give you shooting, some size. He is 6'6", I believe. 6'7". He was a great. He was probably as good of a replacement as they were going to find for a Julian Strother in terms of the shooting and the size.
Mm-hmm.
So they unilaterally dropped. But if I'm Nemhart, dude, you're not. That team next year, I think, has the potential to be very good. They're in the running for Zoom Diallo, who's the number 1 point guard in the class, and it looks like it's boiled down to Arizona, the Zags, and UW are the 3 schools. He's a West Coast dude from Prolific Prep, plays up at Napa. I actually just watched him play against the Boozer twins not that long ago. Kid can go. Like, this is a team that next year, if these guys all come back with the exception of Watson, and they're always good for 1 or 2 transfers, and they're always good for 1 or 2 freshmen, could make some serious noise. I just don't know what the disgruntled nature is. For what it is worth, Creighton is getting blasted by UNLV right now.
That's funny because originally on this Picks of the Week slate, I had that game on here.
I saw that it wasn't on here, which is why I was comfortable saying that.
Yeah, and I had it on here thinking, UNLV is not an easy place to play. I bet you UNLV, could possibly upset Creighton. Interesting. All right, so let's move on with the Picks of the Week. We got Baylor at Michigan. Played at Little Caesar Arena at Detroit, so in-state, but not Michigan State's home court. Caleb's going with Baylor.
I'm taking Baylor. Michigan State I took them to beat, was it Wisconsin?
Yep.
And for what it's worth, they shot the ball good finally.
Yeah. But they gave up 1,000 points to Wisconsin.
They didn't defend. And it's like, I'm taking Baylor. Baylor is a really solid, really, really deep team that I feel like can kind of cut you a bunch of different ways with a bunch of different guys who all just kind of do their role. So give me Baylor. Give me the Bears.
I agree. I can't go with Michigan State till I see it at this point. I mean, they just
I took them in that.
They just lost to Nebraska. They dropped 2 last week.
Yeah, I took them in. I think both of those games.
Right.
And I was like, I'm out until I see it.
Right. Me too. All right. Next is Kansas, and now we're in the Saturday's game. So, Kansas at Indiana at Assembly Hall. Caleb,
give me Kansas. I'll take KU. They're just in my opinion, they're the better team. They have 3 guys that can go any point. Any of their big 3 can kind of take a game over. And Hunter Dickinson is the best player in this game. So even on the road, give me.
Interesting matchup up front with all of Indiana's bigs against Dickinson. But, I mean, both teams struggle, from shooting from the outside. So this game might be closer than you would expect. And Indiana, that place can be one of the loudest places in the country, but I still got to go with KU.
In a close game, give me the team with the alpha. That's kind of the break for me. In a close game, I want Hunter Dickinson. versus anybody Indiana can throw at him.
And I just think Indiana has, or excuse me, KU has better guard play, though neither team is really getting great guard play right now. All right, so next we have Texas A&M at Houston. Interesting matchup. I think it's Houston's first real test of the year.
Yeah, I'm gonna take Houston. This is a team that I think is always, while March is always tough to trust, they defend, they're at home, it's their first test. Kelvin Sampson always has these dudes. They don't really let you down. Like, they're always going to show up and play hard. I think I'm taking the Cougars.
Yeah, A&M's another team that can't shoot. Of course, Houston's having their own problems scoring. Probably could be, a game played in the 60s, a slugfest.
That's how they like it.
I got to go with Houston. Yeah, I got to go with Houston at home. All right, so now we have Clemson at Memphis, and I believe this is where the Grizzlies play, so it won't be on Memphis's home court. Here's what's interesting is, we don't know who's going to be playing for Memphis, because with the ruling today, the court ruling, could DeAndre Williams come back at 27 years old? Because he was denied a waiver. Daquan Tomlin just transferred there, but he has to graduate before he can play.
He's not eligible until the second semester, I believe.
Right. Oh, okay. And then Jordan Brown has left the team, and we're not sure what's going on there. So very interesting things going on with Clemson or Memphis. But, actually, once Memphis gets everything worked out, they're going to be a tough team.
Yeah. For all those reasons, I think this Memphis team is going to be terrifying come the second half of the season. And in March, they're going to be athletic. They're getting a legit guy who fits them to a glove in Tomlin in terms of just the athleticism and his ability to kind of do a little bit of everything. But because of there's questions of who's going to be there, Tomlin, I believe, is not eligible till the second semester. I've seen Clemson. They are a pretty gritty team. I'm going to take Clemson here. And what would probably be an upset. But this Memphis team is going to be very hard to pick against once all these guys have it figured out and that second semester rolls around.
Right. So far, everybody's the same. Caleb picked Clemson. I'm picking Clemson. You pick Clemson. And right now, so far, we have no differences of opinion on any of these games. All right. Next, this is the Champions Classic. It's played at Atlanta, Georgia this year. We have Ohio State versus UCLA in Atlanta.
I'm going to take Ohio State.
Tough one, isn't it?
Yeah. I've seen UCLA a couple of times now. Obviously, my Zags played them. I've seen their Pac-12 team, so I just kind of get these West Coast games. I'm still not overly impressed with them. I think they're a solid team.
UCLA or Ohio State or both?
Honestly, both. I saw Ohio State thump Santa Clara is the only time I've seen them play, and so I couldn't really take a lot out of that game because the Broncos have kind of completely fallen off. The wheels have fallen off that wagon pretty recently. But I've seen UCLA. I'm not super impressed. Like, they're a solid team, but they don't really do it for me. I'm going to take Ohio State, but this is a game of teams that I think are good, not great.
Right. Yeah, again, UCLA right now, I'm going to go with UCLA. Ohio State's got the experience. I think UCLA's got more upside. I don't know. I just going with a gut feel here. I'm going with UCLA.
Yeah. This is literally the teams that are both going to end up in the tournament and probably get bounced in the second weekend game.
Yeah, maybe even sooner.
And could go sooner.
They're good teams, but they're not great teams.
Yeah.
All right. So now we have Arizona versus now, is that Purdue's home court? Gamebridge? That doesn't ring a bell to me.
It doesn't ring a bell, but it's going to be obviously more of a home environment.
But it says Fieldhouse, so I guess that is at Purdue. So we have Arizona at Purdue. Wow.
Game of the week.
Yeah. Like game of the month.
I'm gonna take Arizona. I said they're in the episode prior, I took them as the number one team in the country. I think they're playing good ball. They just handled, was it Wisconsin that they played recently?
Yeah.
I watched a little bit of that. Yeah. They handled them. They're rolling right now. They're deep. they've got veterans kind of leading the way, and guys like obviously Caleb, Pele Larson. This is not to say that this isn't going to be a game, and Purdue can obviously win this game. They've got Edey. As much as I'm not an Edey guy, he's still pretty much a lock for 25 and 13 a night minimum. So this is a war, but I think Zona top to bottom is a better team, and they have the bodies to throw at Edey. They've got the 7-foot freshman. Like they're gonna be able to throw enough at him where he won't be able to just go for 35 and 20.
Correct. And you know what? Initially, I was going to put Purdue down, and then I just thought about, they have Ballo. And then they have the 7'2" foot freshman, and I just think they have too much maybe.
Because Edey
they might be able to neutralize Edey pretty well. So
he's going to have to, because like with a guy like Ballo and the physicality, like Edey will have to guard, like legitimately guard on the other end. He's not going to just kind of do the hit and stand in the post and defer. Like he's going to physically have a guy who's going to go at him on both sides of the court. And if he gets in foul trouble, they're bringing another 7'2" kid to just kind of be a body and wear on him. So it's not going to be one of those nights where Edey can kind of just let the game come to him because he's 7'5" or whatever he is.
Right. Now we have another beauty here. And this is that Champions Classic again. And we have North Carolina versus Kentucky in Atlanta. Caleb, by the way, has agreed with Drew on every pick so far. And the only place I've differed is I took UCLA and they took Ohio State. So and he's going with UNC in this matchup.
I'm going to have to keep the train rolling. I'm going with UNC. Kentucky is just, as they have been in the past, is the type of team that can beat anybody any day. But I'm just going to go with the team that I think is just playing better basketball and is kind of the antithesis of Kentucky's bunch of young guys, super talented, and NBA first-round picks all over the roster, whereas UNC's got 4- and 5th-year seniors, guys who've been here, done that. After the disappointing year last year, UNC's kind of looking to rebound and build off that promise. Harrison Ingram is damn near their best player after transferring and has revitalized his career. So I'm going to take North Carolina. But again, this is the type of game where just off of talent alone, Kentucky can give anyone a game anywhere in the country.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. Kentucky's getting back their big guys. Yes. How does Calipari screw this up? Because they've really been playing very well as a small ball team. So I'm usually a Calipari doubter, but I'm going to go with UK here. All right, now we have an interesting game at Cincinnati, Dayton at Cincinnati. Caleb is going with U of D. Of course, he is from Dayton.
I'm going to take I like Dayton, and ever since we had that awesome interview with Deron Holmes almost 2 years ago now, but I'm going to take Cincinnati. From what I've seen, Cincinnati just seems like a very balanced team. I believe on KenPom, they're like 31st in offense and 30th on defense. So not elite, not like high level elite on either side, but just very consistent. They don't beat themselves. I haven't seen them play a full game, but I'm going to take Cincinnati because I think they're just kind of doing what the Bearcats do, just be really solid on both sides of the floor.
I really like Jizzle James, who's Edgar and James' son at point guard. He doesn't even start for them. And they have, locking in at center, and now they have Bandego, and they're playing them together with Bandego playing the power forward. Of course, Bandego's only played 3 or 4 games, but I really like what I saw from Cincy in the loss to Xavier. I just think they have more depth, more balance, and Deron Holmes is going to have a tough time against those 2 7-footers. Yeah. All right, now we have Alabama, and you're telling me Creighton's getting their ass handed to them right now. This game's at Omaha. Bama hasn't really beaten a good team yet this year, and Caleb is going with Bama.
Oh man, I'm not really sold on this Bama team. I don't really like this Bama team. I'm taking the Blue Jays. Like they've kind of hit a bit of a lull where they haven't really looked good. They lost. They got crushed by Colorado State. The final score in that UNLV game, Creighton game, just for viewers. You don't want it? Don't want it?
Go ahead. I was going to watch it, but go ahead.
79-64. So, I mean, they got handled pretty well. But this is still a good Creighton team, man. And, like, if you go just off their 5, there's not a lot of teams in the country that have probably a better starting 5 and they got guys who do a little bit of everything. So this Creighton team is going to figure this thing out. I think this is a get-right game for them against a solid opponent. They're going to probably not be too happy after the back-to-back couple losses they've had. Give me the Blue Jays.
Yeah. That UNLV game was a trap game. You got to go on the road against a UNLV team that's been underachieving, but has talent. And you go there, and all you're thinking about is Saturday against Alabama. And what happens? You lose. All right. Here we got an interesting battle. Last game of the Saturday slate, we have San Francisco at Utah State. Both teams have been good this year. I think Utah State's only dropped one so far.
They're 9-1, I believe. 9-1 or 8-1. They've only lost. I know they've only lost one. This is a tough one. I mean, you got my alma mater, who famously I root against pretty heavily for my Bulldogs. I haven't seen. The thing is USF has had some really good moments, but every game I've watched, I've been like not impressed at all. Like, and maybe it's just I keep catching the bad games. Like I watched the Boise State game and was like, this offense is horrendous. I watched another game they lost, or the Arizona State game, and I was like, wow, these guys like can't get a bucket. I'm gonna take Utah. I'm gonna take Utah State. I think this USF team isn't gonna really figure things out until conference play. I think we're gonna really find out who they are once conference hits. But I just have not been impressed with from what I've seen. I don't really like their offense. I think Mongolian Mike's hype has hit a complete wall, to be honest. I think
but I do like their center.
Magobo.
I really do like him.
No, he's awesome. He to me, he's kind of like what's keeping that team up, because I think defensively they've been really solid because he rebounds the hell out of the ball. He is super athletic. But
my God, is he athletic?
He is super athletic.
I've seen him grab rebounds where it appears like his elbow is at the rim.
Yeah, he's really fun to watch. I like him a lot, but everyone else on this team, I'm
Yeah.
I was told Mongolian Mike was going to be the highest rated transfer I've ever gotten. We watched him a lot, Rich. You and I probably talked about him before anybody else was. I mean, years ago. And it's like we were intrigued, and now a season and a quarter in, I'm like, not doing it for me, really.
Yeah, he just doesn't seem to. I think he'd be great, like as a 3-on-3 player, or probably do fine in the G League, But in a structured system, he just doesn't seem to have the awareness or the ability to play team basketball.
They were talking to him about he's a point forward hybrid, and I'm like, I don't see it. I see a guy that has decent size and can do everything.
Oh, he can play make, but just not consistently.
But that's he's not a point. When I think point forward, I'm like, you're running your offense.
Oh yeah,
whether it's through the high post or on the you're not doing. He can make a play versus like play make. You know what I mean? I think those are different things.
And again, he probably does his best playmaking in on the break.
Yeah.
I mean, his dad was a globetrotter. No, I'm serious though.
Yeah,
that's kind of what he was probably taught. Was kind of showy basketball, not fundamental basketball. All right, so we're all going with Utah State there at home. Here, this is an interesting game. We have USC at Auburn. USC has kind of hit the skids a little bit here.
Give me Auburn. This USC team has potential, but Auburn, I think, is just a straight up better basketball team, and it's at Auburn. So I think this, to me, like in terms of picks, this is one of the easier ones for me. I've seen USC. I've been impressed 0 times by them now.
No, I like their win over Kansas State, but that's kind of where it stopped. And that was like
I didn't.
That was like week 1.
Yeah, I watched them play in the whatever their feast week their Thanksgiving tournament was. Wasn't impressed. They got handled by my Zags, who have been okay this year relative to standards. From what I've seen and from what I've seen from Auburn, this was an easy one.
We're all going with Auburn. All right, so now that's a Sunday game. Now we're to Tuesday the 19th, and we got Florida versus Michigan in Charlotte, North Carolina. Caleb's going with Florida.
I'll take Florida too. Michigan's not the same Michigan. I mean, and I think Florida is kind of starting to find a bit of a rhythm with Golden. My jury's still out on him a little bit, to be honest. I thought it was kind of a premature hire from USF, but I think they're starting to find a bit of a groove. They've had some good wins now, a couple years in a row. Like last year, they had a couple good wins. They got some good ones here. So I'll take Florida.
Florida's got more athleticism, more depth, more shooting. Michigan's just not what we're used to seeing from Michigan.
Totally.
All right. Now we have Virginia at Memphis at the FedEx Forum again. Interesting game. Caleb's going with Memphis.
I'm going to take Florida for the point where I believe they're nothing surprising here. I think they're like the 5th or 6th rated defense in the country.
Are we talking?
Sorry,
Virginia.
Right. Yes, I'm taking Virginia here. This is a type of game where Memphis, the way that they play, can get a little unwieldy and get a little out of hand. And I think that Virginia is the perfect team to kind of exploit that. They still can never figure offense out consistently, but they are really solid defensively as always. And Memphis is a type of team where I think there's a little bit of front runner to them, where if you slow the game down, you kind of force them into a slugfest. They just don't respond well to that type of play. Right. And I think that the Cavaliers here are just going to be able to kind of impose their style of play a little bit more. If this turns into a track meet where it's up and down, free-flowing basketball, Memphis wins. But Virginia, I think, is famous for being able to slow things down and muck things up, and they're going to do it. And I don't think Memphis can respond well to it.
Right. Yeah, I think Memphis will eventually be better, but I got to go with UVA here. All right, so now we have Marquette at Providence. Big East play starts.
I like this Marquette team a lot from what I've seen. I mean, you got a guy that you can rally behind in Tyler Kolek, who's just plays the most important position in college basketball. I love what was it, Ogadabo? I always pronounce his last name wrong.
Yeah, he put the wrong thought.
Yeah,
Iguodaro.
I love watching him play. I've really watched him recently, like obviously within the Maui, and just the energy that guy brings. I think he's the type of dude that like you want to go to battle with and you want to have kind of running your back line. So I'll take Marquette.
All righty. I agree. We're all going with Marquette. All right. Now we have Baylor. This is Wednesday, December 20th. We have Baylor versus Duke at Madison Square Garden. And Caleb, the traitor, is going against his Dukies, picking Baylor.
I'm taking Baylor too. This Duke team has talent. Like, they are super talented, but I just haven't really seen them put it. I feel like I just haven't seen them really all put it together. Whereas I think this Baylor team is just playing good basketball right now. So I'll take Baylor.
I agree. We're all going with Baylor. All right. Next up, we have North Carolina again versus Oklahoma at Charlotte, North Carolina. And Caleb's going with North Carolina. Oklahoma's still undefeated.
I like this Oklahoma team. I think they're pretty good.
Yeah.
I've only seen them play once, but I haven't picked too many like upsets here. I think this Oklahoma team keeps it rolling. I'll take Oklahoma here, but this is me maybe trying to make up some games here as well.
No, this is a tight one. It's a tight one.
This is a tough one.
I'm basically going with Carolina because it's in their home state.
Yeah.
All right. Big East play continues. We have Villanova at Creighton. Caleb's going with Nova. Wow, he really hates Creighton.
I like this Creighton team, man. I think that this team is going to figure it out. They've hit a little bit of a rough patch, but I'm taking the Blue Jays again. I think they are better coached, and I think that they have the better players when you look at kind of the key guys. I think they just got plenty of dudes who can hurt you in a bunch of different ways. Not to say Nova can't, but I'm not, as we talked about, I don't know if Kyle Neptune can get these guys up for a game like this, and I think Creighton's going to be looking to really pick up some big wins after a couple of bad losses.
Yeah, they played well in the second half against UCLA, but the first half they didn't look good. They escaped with a close win. Yeah, still not buying Nova yet. Going with Creighton. All right, next game is in Phoenix, Arizona, and we have Alabama versus Arizona, but it might as well say at Arizona.
Give me the Wildcats, man. They are my number one team in the nation. I have not seen a reason to go against them. They're more or less at home. against, like I said, a middling Alabama team that is okay at best, in my opinion.
All right. Next, we're all the way up to December 21st, one game that day. And I only put this out of respect for the rivalry. But
I didn't see this
Louisville just got walloped by DePaul, who had like won 1 or 2 games all year. UK at Louisville.
I cannot, no matter how many points I want to try to make up, how sporadic I want to be, how much of a hot take, there is no way in hell I am taking Louisville. I'm not taking them in freaking any game this year. HPP will roll out our starting 5, and we might give them a game. It might be a fucking no chance.
I'll tell you what. Louisville might beat Notre Dame because that's how bad Notre Dame is.
2 monkeys throwing crap at each other, Rich. That's just 2 monkeys throwing crap at each other. You couldn't pay me to watch that game. I haven't watched Notre Dame. I've watched Notre Dame and Louisville collectively in probably the last 500 days, this many times combined.
I saw Louisville play once this year, and they actually played pretty well. That was the games that were in Brooklyn or New York.
Oh yeah, they did.
The little tournament around Thanksgiving. All right, next up, we got another good rivalry game. December 22nd, we have Illinois at Missouri. No, excuse me, not at Missouri. In St. Louis, Missouri. So not a quote unquote home game.
I'm gonna take Illinois here. Not super familiar with Missouri this year. I have seen Illinois play. Excuse me. I'm gonna take Illinois. I think that they're a solid team.
Yeah. I agree. I'm not too impressed with Missouri. Though they did play Kansas pretty well.
They played Kansas, well.
I mean, a lot better than they did last year. If you remember last year, it was a bloodbath.
That was their wake-up call game. Wasn't that Missouri? Wasn't Missouri like on a tear? And then
but they had played nobody, and then they played Kansas, and they ended up losing like 30-some points or something. Yeah. All right, so now we have December 23rd, just before Christmas. We have Butler at Providence. Butler, has really been one of the surprise teams this year, and that's why I put it on here.
I'm going to take Butler here. They have been a surprise. I didn't really pay much attention to them early, but I've kind of looked a little bit more into I haven't watched them play, but I've looked a little bit more into their numbers, on their Ken Palm ratings and all that stuff, just out of kind of curiosity. And they've actually been pretty solid this year and have kind of earned the surprise. So I'm going to take Butler here.
All right. I'm going to go with Providence. Providence has definitely not played great this year, but they are home. So I'm going to go with Providence. All right. Caleb also chose Providence. All right. Now we have also on the 23rd, we have Arizona versus Florida Atlantic in Las Vegas. Arizona's running the gauntlet here. Purdue, then Alabama, now Florida Atlantic.
I'm sticking with Arizona, but I really like this FAU team. I'm more so sticking with Zona because I have them as my number 1 team in the nation right now. I've seen no reason to change that, in my opinion. But I like this Florida Atlantic team, and if they lose a game, I could see this being the one that they drop. They're coming off like Rich said, a gauntlet here. Like I could see this being a game where if it's going to catch up to them, I could see this being a game because they're playing a good FAU team on a relatively neutral site. It will lean more Arizona, but still, I'm taking Zona. But I think this Florida Atlantic team can give them some trouble. It's a good team.
All right, I agree. I'm going with Arizona, and so is Caleb. Now we move to Thursday the 28th. Which is quite a ways away. There's a big gap of dearth of games around Christmas, a couple days before, a couple days after. There's really not much good college basketball on. So on the 28th, we have USC at Oregon, and Oregon, of course, has been doing okay without arguably their two best players. Actually 3 of, I think their second best incoming freshman was like a top 50 guy, and their 2 star big men are both been out. USC's not playing well. This is kind of Oregon's home. This is a mess. I mean, who knows? I mean, Oregon might get healthy, by the time this game rolls around.
From what I heard, I believe Nathan is 8 was. I don't think they'll be healthy in time. I don't know. From what I've read, I don't think they'll be healthy in time. If they were, I would be taking Oregon. I think USC gets this game more so they win the war of attrition here.
Right.
Their guys are just healthier. Their dudes are healthier than Oregon's dudes. A healthy Oregon beats this USC team, in my opinion. They wouldn't be able to stop Biddle, and they wouldn't be able to stop Dante.
Right. I'm hoping USC finally gets it together at some point, but they haven't looked good lately. And Isaiah Collier hasn't really looked great lately. So, all right. So now we're all the way up to the 29th. We have San Diego State versus Gonzaga in Spokane.
I'm taking the Zags. As disappointed as I was with that loss, and I think the Zags have room to improve, San Diego State, in my opinion, does not look good. They have avoided a lot of near upsets, and I mean really have avoided them. Like, we're talking 1 possession, 2 possession games. I think they're going to play the Zags, and I think the Zags might take it to them a little bit because this San Diego State team just is not – they do not look right. They do not look like the team that we saw last year.
And their last game, they had to play without Jason Ledee, who's been their best player. And I haven't seen anything to give any indication on how long Ledee might be out.
Yeah. If Ledee can't go, this could get bad, in my opinion. I just don't think San Diego State's offense is already on the slower, more stymied side. And without him on the road, and they haven't played great, and their defense hasn't really been that great. I mean, they're giving up 70+ to like UC San Diego. Not a good look.
Right. So to recap on those last two, we're all rolling with USC. We're all rolling with the Zags. Another game on the 29th is Washington at Colorado. Of course, Corey Williams, star freshman for Colorado, will miss that game. Missed the last game, and they trounced the Hurricanes. So, and of course, that same day, or no, the night before, Washington defeated Gonzaga. Interesting game. Yeah.
I got Colorado. I think Colorado is just the better team. I think Washington is a really up and down team. I mean, maybe you can say I'm bitter from the loss they handed my team, but that Washington team did not play. The Zags beat themselves. I don't think Washington, like, when they turned the ball over, the Zags shot themselves in that foot. I think this Colorado team, they're not ranked like they were, I believe, coming into the season. I don't think they're ranked anymore, but I think they're on the cusp of climbing back into that top 25. As a couple of these teams lose that we predicted, they could climb back in that low end, I think.
Right.
I think this team is really – I think they're a very solid team.
Right. Caleb is going with Colorado, and I am going with Colorado. So, yeah, I think you got to go with the Buffs at home. All right, on December 30th, we have Creighton at Marquette.
Taking the Blue Jays on their other 2 appearances on here. I'm taking Marquette on this one. They're at home. Again, I think Marquette is a really, really solid team. This doesn't take away from the team I think Creighton is. This is more just you're on the road. This Marquette team is legit. I'll take them.
Right. I think Marquette's top 5 team. It's just they're that good. You know, I'm in Connecticut, you know, and they are so good.
My 3 favorite teams so far this year, personally, Arizona, UConn, Marquette's number 3 for me, personally.
Yeah, I hear you. All right. Another game we got on December 30th. We have UCLA at Oregon. Again, not sure how healthy Oregon will be for this one. Caleb's going with UCLA.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Bruins. Again, this is just, more of a healthy thing. I just don't know if Oregon's going to be healthy enough. You know, you have a guy like Adem Bona in the middle. Like, I think this Oregon team, when they get those 2 centers back, particularly, I know they're missing their top 50 freshmen, but like those 2 guys can really play. And without them, with one of them, I'd actually probably lean Oregon. With both of them, I'd for sure take Oregon, but without either of them, I think UCLA is just physical and gritty enough to kind of gut one out here.
And the size.
Yeah.
You know, how do you match up with UCLA's size without?
They're going to just outmuscle this team that's missing 2 centers.
Well, in Mara's case, you know, it's not so much outmuscle, but he has Zach Edey-like size.
Yeah,
outreach.
Just the lane, outreach, outmuscle for sure.
Right. All right, so last game, and this is January 2nd, the day we'll return. We have North Carolina at Pittsburgh.
I haven't picked UNC, or I did take UNC. I'm going to take UNC here again. I think this team is just kind of playing good basketball. do I think that this team is going to be the finals, surprise finals darling that they were 2 years ago? No, but I think Ingram has fit really well. They're just a veteran team, and I haven't seen enough of Pittsburgh to tell me that they can beat North Carolina. Heads up.
Yeah, North Carolina is on the fringe of my possible national champs. Right on the edge there.
They're like one of those teams pushing that good to great barrier. When they're really clicking, I think they can play with anybody. They've got veteran players, the guys playing their role, but I still don't know if they're able to would I take them against a UConn or a Marquette or an Arizona or a Purdue? Probably no, I wouldn't. Not probably not, I wouldn't.
Right. Yeah, Pitt's a solid team, and of course they have Jason Wasserman's number 4 overall pick and freshman Barrington. And if you look at any of the box scores, Carrington plays really well when he's playing against Siena and Hofstra, not so well against the North Carolinas. So there you go. We're all 3 of us are going with UNC, and that wraps up our picks of the week. Okay, that wraps up this week's episode. As always, I want to thank our listeners. I want to thank our we didn't have a special guest, but I want to thank Caleb and Drew for joining me. If you ever miss an episode, you can get caught up at hoopsprospects.com. Also, if you want to contribute to our mailbag, you can do so and send a question to admin@hoopsprospects.com. Or you can hit us up on social media on Twitter at Hoops Prospects, on Instagram at The Hoops Prospects, and on Facebook at Hoops Pros. And we're actually going to do a Christmas episode later this week, so look for that. We're going to be talking NBA. We will have a special guest for that one. And we'll just be doing just kind of fun Christmassy things, too.